Serious, people who have killed in self-defense, what's the thing that haunts you the most? USPASH Tango Uniform 2020 responded. First shot hit him high in the sternum at about 8 feet, second at about 3 foot right into the heart. The smell of everything. You never hear about any of that. And I spent 3 hours trying to wash the blood off. Dude was on PCP, a day after doing 6 months for DV. He thought I was sleeping with his girlfriend because I was in her old apartment. She apparently had a restraining order on him. He had a pretty unhealthy knife on him and kept coming after the first shot. Corwana said the first shot killed him. It would have taken a bite a minute. I had to get a new apartment in the same complex because of all the bodily fluids and excrement in the bedroom. Scary part. Friend who had done a tour in Nam told me the first one is either the hardest one or the easiest one. I almost didn't pull the trigger. Now. Not a second thought. And that bothers me. USPASH Blinmaster 420 responded. The people close to him didn't believe he could be a bad man. Had to leave my hometown because I couldn't get a job or be left alone after doing a couple year in prison for manslaughter. Didn't have 150k for lawyers. He was nice to everyone, but behind closed door was an entire different person. Just a very few people knew. Abused my mom and I mentally and physically for my entire childhood until one day he actually tried to kill us, but I got him first. I don't know why that day he lost it worse than any other time, and I wonder every day why. And now I developed a bunch of mental and physical health problems. USPASH Diligent _shock 2437 responded. The way his body crumpled and the gurgling sounds he made. I had been stabbed, managed to get the knife from him and stabbed him with it. Being that close and having the feeling of the knife in my hand piercing his flesh made it so much worse. Feels like stabbing an orange. A tiny bit of resistance then just sliding in. I would have rather had a gun. For anyone wondering, I was being jumped by him and 3 others. I guess he got carried away in the violence and stabbed me. The others ran away when I stabbed him. They were charged in his death. U/deleted responded. While visiting my aunt and sick uncle on their farm for the weekend to help put up a security gate in their house due to increase in crime in their neighborhood, I shot a guy trying to break down the newly installed security gate around 3 a.m. I was woken up by my aunt and niece saying they heard a noise by the back door and can't get my uncle out of bed, asked me to go and look. Sure enough, there was someone trying to break the gate open. We shouted that there's people in here and to go away. He had the audacity to shout back that he knows and is still coming in. My aunt ran to fetch my uncle's revolver and wanted to shoot through the door. She was panicking and shaking, so I took the gun from her. Having shot it hundreds of times before, it felt like target practice. I shot 2x warning shots through the door, but at the feet. Both shots landed, one on his foot causing him to fall down, and the second shot hitting him in the thigh. Bleeding badly. He ran off and left a trail of blood. Body was found the next day by a neighbor hidden in his shed. What haunts me is the innocence of it all. I could have shoot to kill, but I chose not to. It killed him anyways. U/crushenit responded. It was self-defense. Fuck em. And I never think about it. Having lived in countries where kidnapping was a daily thing, we always had to make sure we had space between us and the car in front of us to make an escape. It's mainly the motorcycles riding in between lanes that you have to worry about in those countries. Always had a gun in the car, but we were taught that you could do way more damage with the car. I've had over 70 family members kidnapped. Most were rescued, some never made it. Countries in question: Haiti, Mexico, Guatemala. U/distortion warrior responded. I was a Marine on deployment at the time, deployed during the Second Iraq War. It was very late, dark, but you could still see, just not really well. Our small patrol convoy was wrapping up. We're leaving some town soon. We stopped for a while so some people could talk to our people. I'm watching my area, my sector, and some non-uniformed civvy wearing chucklehead about 50 yards away raised his rifle and shot a couple rounds at me. They both went a few feet higher my right shoulder. I went from high ready to kneeling the instant I saw that flash, and I shot back, dropped him, dropped the guy next to him who was moving to grab the other guy's rifle. It was dark behind them. We took some rounds from the rear and shortly later the front too, but I kept my eyes on my sector in case more were coming. I never got to see the guys I dropped up close, never got the story. We just left and received pop shots from building window. I get really uptight feelings about it, guarded. In some ways it was simpler to know you might get shot and it was your responsibility to fight back aggressively. It makes me feel that there are a mix of people that wouldn't be missed if they died fighting. Just another body, alive 1 minute, dead the next, not precious. I don't understand why they act like they do. U/BR33538 responded. Like others have said in here as well, I was a combat vet at 18. I graduated high school at 17, turned 18 in basic and deployed right after basic training to Afghanistan. It was just always weird coming home that first time. Looking at your friends you saw a year ago and your family knowing you've killed people in war is just a weird feeling. I remember my first large firefight where the enemy called in QRF was in combat for so long we had to get resupplied mid-firefight and Apaches came in and also killed a lot of people and we cheered and didn't think anything of it. I came back and I remember calling home and called my granny, and just hearing her voice just seemed like I was in some alternate reality, almost like it just wasn't the same reality. Of course I said we weren't doing anything and just working hard, but going from cheering on death and wanting to kill people and killing people to back home and getting out really fucks your mind up. Now that I have a kid and if he sees a soldier or commercial, and he says that it's cool and he wants to be a solider, it hurts me. I couldn't ever imagine my kid going through the horrible amount of PTSD and trauma that I deal with daily. U/iron_pig1919 responded. A man attacked me with a hammer. I remember the first shot almost seemed like time slowed to the point, but I swear I saw the impact of it. I remember as others had mentioned how the small trailer smelled to the point that sometimes I will still smell it, it seems like. I remember every tiny detail, but specifically, remember seeing the little girl panties he had pinned on his bedroom wall. I remember my first thought after the last round was fired, was how weird it was my ears weren't ringing like in the movies. I remember assessing him to provide first aid and seeing the back half of a .45 caliber round sticking halfway out of his back. I remember his last words as Ems wheeled him out, shouting at me and his family. No, this is probably going to be buried in the comments at this point, but therapy has helped me a lot, and I'm slowly being able to talk more about it. Also, of your LEO, EMS, firefighter, or military, our mental health is not talked about enough. If you're struggling with PTSD, seek help and therapy. In those fields, it's looked down upon and isn't talked about, but I promise you it helps. Hopefully someone who needs it reads that last bit. Peace and love guys. U/Jazzlike_Aardvark35 responded. My adoptive father, 80, who saved my life from horrible childhood circumstances, was trained in genetics in the 60s. He ended up a Fox News anti-COVID vaccine type of fellow who unfortunately contracted COVID late in 2021 and I was his medical power of attorney. The physicians said he needed a ventilator and asked did I want that for him. I never got to ask him what he wanted because of his dire condition. He didn't have a living will. The prognosis was very poor. He could live for days, weeks on the ventilator but would likely die anyway, I was told. I decided to let him die. I felt and somewhat still feel like I killed him. I know this isn't a self-defense situation. However, I still feel like maybe, just maybe he could have pulled through. I immediately went into a deep depression for 2 years. Still not totally better. I've had counseling but it still bothers me. I feel like I killed him. It's awful. U/dark_jewel72 responded. Home invasion, one to the chest at striking distance roughly 9 years ago. It doesn't bother me too much anymore, except thinking of his family and the fact that he was taken entirely from the world. Disco Elysium has a line that got me about a dead man's personality no longer existing in the world. His decisions, sure, but there's still people affected by the loss and it may be the last of him ever, for all of time. There was lots of local hero worship because this was the South. I enjoyed the attention for a while but in hindsight I feel really gross about it all. At any rate, the top comment about learning about yourself that you could do it again is entirely true. It felt like I hesitated for years in the moment. I've even stopped killing even spiders or bugs since, but if I was put in the situation I know I wouldn't have the same hesitation. U/patchworkdeath1390 responded. All the jokes the sheriff deputies made. And the memories that will probably never go away. It was 2 in the morning, and a guy kicked my door in, looking for the chick who was the last tenant. She was already a permanent resident at the graveyard from an OD, but this guy and his 3 friends just got out of jail and didn't know that. I had gotten home from work an hour beforehand, and was playing my PS4 with my night owl friends. Dude kicked my do in, and they started screaming about bitch, where's the money, and called for her by name. One of them shot at me and missed. I returned fire. Between the 4 of them they fired 28 rounds, I fired 19, with a reload in the bedroom. I had glass splinters in my arm from a coffee cup being hit, and all 4 took fatal hits. And the deputies kept making sniper, COD, Battlefield, and Halo jokes. I moved out a few weeks later. Therapy was 2 years before I stopped seeing them in the edges of my vision. U/deleted responded. I don't have a gun, but I have a ton of other weapons. However, at this point all I could grab was a bat, metal, since at the time I did baseball and I keep my sports stuff in a large crate next to my bed. A dude probably on an ungodly amount of drugs broke into my home and attempted to kill both me and my mother. When I heard the shattering of glass, I went downstairs with the bat and I could see him standing in the kitchen looking for us. Turns out the dude was from the house across of us. We had a bad relationship with them because of their son, who was a total jackass, and they refused to admonish their son. But that aside, he broke in, and in the kitchen he took a knife and charged straight at me when he saw me, but before he could reach me I swung the bat as hard as I could and hit him right in the chest, knocking him on his back. He stood back up and rushed at me again. I struck equally hard, but this time with an overhead strike straight on his head, hard enough to leave a remarkable dent in the bat. He stood back up, face covered in blood like a zombie, and he kept coming and kept coming, and of course I kept hitting and kept hitting and kept hitting until he finally fell down dead. He did manage to slice me with the kitchen knife once, hitting my upper arm, but thankfully it wasn't deep. The image of that blood-covered face with the look of complete insanity on his face haunted me for years. U/aromatic_ad_7940 responded. Not quite a kill, but I made the opponent disabled for entire life. I think it's worse than death, but the fact that haunts me was that he was mentally unstable, and people at the town knew that he's a psycho. I was new to the place, I didn't know people around so well. He started barking and trying to punch me. He followed me for like 15 minutes. I was in amusement park. I came to bubblegum buying machine. He came right to me, started talking some shit again. I was with my friends, they were telling me why I don't beat him up. I got very annoyed. Sadly, I took his head and smashed it into the iron bubblegum machine. His brain wasn't okay even that time, but the fact that I smashed it made things worse. I think I ruined someone's life. What if he could rehabilitate from his mental issues? How his life would went. Sorry for my bad English, not a foreign speaker, learning it myself. U/Bryce_Rocks_my_socks69 responded. Shot and killed a guy across the street from his parents' house. He was on meth and had a hatchet and a machete and was charging me and some other people. He'd already assaulted his parents, robbed a knife store, hurt himself, tried to hurt the store employees, and driven all over town, almost hitting so many people and caused at least 1 or 2 crashes. I don't remember actually pulling the trigger, couldn't even tell you how many shots I took. I just remember the aftermath of him laying there bleeding out with his right arm literally hanging by a thread, and then us patching him up until the ambo go there. I know he was still talking, but I don't remember what he said. He died a week later after getting the rest of his arm cut off, getting a trach tube, and going into a coma. I think the worst part was knowing his parents had to watch that. I had met them before and they were a genuinely lovely family, trying to raise his kids that he couldn't take care of or see because of the drugs and mental illness he had. I didn't get to see or talk to them again after that happened, but I wish I could have just to apologize for not doing anything else to prevent us having to kill him. I had a few panic attacks afterwards, but I think my brain has just blocked out the trauma and memory for the most part, so it doesn't really bother me that much anymore, and I can talk about it just fine with anyone who asks about it. U/President Baylibe responded. I haven't killed, but 2 guys pulled a knife on me and robbed me, then one of them followed me off the train alone after putting the knife back in his pocket. I was going home and it was like midnight. I didn't know what he was planning, so as soon as the doors on the train closed behind us after getting off, I jumped him. Threw him to the ground, hit him in the face a few times. Made sure to keep control of his arms so he couldn't grab the knife again. At some point in the fight, his thumb was in my mouth and I bit it off. I can still hear him say, in the calmest, scariest voice LVE ever heard, "Okay, it's off. Are you done now?" After that I took off running, went to my neighbors, and called the cops. Apparently he didn't get up from where I left him and the police drove me back to the train station to identify him. I have a little chip in one of my teeth from where I cracked the bone biting through his thumb. I really can't do anything food-wise that cracks like that anymore, or it sends me right back and I hear his voice in my head again. U/Wolfbright10 responded. As to ARP's original question, their face haunted me for years. Just a horrible human being, with a record a mile long, murders, assaults, robbery, domestic assault. I was just another home invasion to him. Come through the door all fury, and noise, and violence. I tried to reason with him, as he tore my apartment up looking for whatever he thought was there. When he started ripping wires off of things, I asked, "What are you doing?" He responded, "Looking for something to kill you quietly with." So I broke his neck, just grabbed his hair and chin and pushed one way. When he flexed to prevent it, I ripped my hands the other way as far as flesh and bone allowed, and on past that. He looked at me, confused as to how he lost control, his sudden realization that something was wrong, he was dying. He looked me in the eyes, and I saw the life leave his Before he became what he was someone's baby boy, maybe someone's beloved brother. I saw his face and the emotion, the confusion he felt in that moment, replayed in my mind and my dreams for years. I told myself, I saved probably hundreds of future victims from the terror, harm, and helplessness that he left in his wake. The detective at one point said the same thing to me. I did what I had to, and would do it again, but it's not an easy thing to live with, and his face haunts me still. U/Nurmago 969 responded. I was 21. Had a kickboxing tournament. My opponent was 5 feet 5 inches 145 pounds. I was 5 feet 10 inches 145 ibs. The fight ended in round 3, where I noticed that when he throws his right overhand he sets it up with a feint jab to the head and jab to the body, and then he throws his right, and when he throws it he leans his head to the left and leaves his other hand down, so L noticed that, and at one point in the round he sets his overhand. I pretended that I was guarding and timed my right kick very well, and I hit him in the top of his head hard with the strongest part of the shin, and I immediately got worried because of the way he slammed his head on the canvas. The match stopped instantly, and I remember how his team tried to wake him up, and after a while he woke up. I went to him to shake his hand and the guy is not responding. I looked at him and his eyes are barely open. They sent him to hospital, and next thing I knew the guy passed away in morning of the day after. I will never forget how his mother was screaming and crying when he got knocked out. I stopped fighting professionally not because of this incident but because of injuries, and I decided to not pursue this sport for good, but I can't forget this incident no matter how hard I tried to forget. U/Herbalperts Grammy responded. Throwaway. My abbreviated backstory to this is that I played college football in the early 2000s and was recruited as a collector for some guys who ran a gambling ring. 98% of my job was intimidation tactics, 2% was actual physicality. It's probably not like that anymore with the nil, but it was a job and a way to make money anyway. Very long story short, I attempted to collect a debt and failed, but I left the debtor fairly disabled. I had a chance run-in with his brother about a year later at a nightclub bar. I didn't recognize him, but he apparently recognized me and attempted to jump me in the parking lot with a length of steel. He ended up hitting his head on something during the scuffle and he was lights out. I fled and he was found in the morning. Police must have chalked it up to a too drunk, fell and hit his head type thing. I've done some awful shit, but I didn't want to hurt that man. I'm a father with my own kids now, and I still wonder if I'm going to get my own someday. I don't expect it. U/The Last Zima Drinker responded. Decades ago a bum came up to me and my friends skating while acting crazy and mumbling shit, then he said he wanted to shoot somebody. As soon as he said that, I moved behind him and grabbed my board with both hands. When he reached into his pocket, I hit him in the side of the head as hard as I could. Unfortunately, I had just replaced my kingpin and it was a half-inch too long. It punched a perfect round hole in his skull and he instantly dropped and started agonal breathing. He was behind a building and no one was going to find him for a while. We left and went to the next spot. I do not have confirmation that he died, but he sure looked like he was dying when we left. I can still perfectly recall the deep hole with purplish blood trickling out and his gasping. No one ever mentioned it again and it never bothered me at all.
U/Maleficent Shoulder 5 responded. The death doesn't bother me. I had no other choice given the constraints. It was a simple DV call between son and father. I went to try and talk to the son to see what was up when he ambushed me from a shed maybe 15 feet away with a machete in one hand and a .38 revolver in the other. I did my thing, end of story. But there's two things I consistently think about. The silence. My ears never rang. I don't recall hearing the shots. I remember seeing the slide of my gun moving, but I felt no recoil. It was over in 3 seconds. The kid face planted the ground, and the dad just stood there. Didn't scream. Didn't cry. Didn't say a word. Calmly walked to where I told him to go and stood there. The immediate change in how everyone in my life treated me. I haven't been invited to a family Thanksgiving, Christmas, or birthday in almost 6 years. Even my mom got outed. She joins us on Christmas with pizza from my favorite pizza joint. Nothing like day-old pizza while watching your son open up gifts while knowing the rest of your family is enjoying each other's company, making memories.
Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Leave your own stories down below, I would love to read them. If you would like to see more videos like this, please like and subscribe, it helps me out greatly.